If you noticed a very creepy vibe, I agree with you. At the National Assembly hearing where New Jeans' Hanni, one of the members, came in to testify, and all of those politicians, it looks like it wasn't the first time they had met or talked. And she needs her real mommy and daddy, because you can call Hee-jin mama all you want. She ain't your real mom. And you can call all those men who were in the hearing room, outside the hearing room, giving gestures of support. You can call them your uncle all you want, but they ain't your real uncle. So it looks like New Jeans' Hanni is the latest Stockholm sacrifice to be coming out of Mama New Jeans' pantry. And this time, she went to a hearing where the other testimonies were about egregious workplace labor violations that led to death for unsafe labor practices. And here Hanni is trying to be guided and to squeeze her incident of so-called workplace bullying where there is absolutely no evidence of, and even if it were the incident of workplace bullying, is how she interprets the Korean words of ignore her, 무시해. However, as I've gone through in some previous videos, I think she may even be misinterpreting those words, because as we saw from the National Assembly hearing, her Korean ain't all that great.
정말 죄송한데 저 이해 못했어요. 죄송.
When she speaks it, it sounds very good, but she doesn't have a huge vocabulary yet in Korean, and many people don't when you're studying. That's fine. However, to basically be using that sort of language interpretation as your basis for a very serious attack on a conglomerate in Korea, you better know what's going on. And the more I thought about it, her case, even if it were true that a manager said 무시해, that could also be interpreted as not her, just let it go. We've went over this before, but now I'm thinking if this were true, I would think that most likely this is more of a case of let it go, just let it go. The manager telling the ILLIT people, let it go. That is a much more accurate interpretation of that phrase in that context. We're going to go through the specifics of what happened, why it happened on paper, and what was underneath. But really, I think there was a very interesting dynamic being exposed here. Not only did it expose the level of hypocrisy and the circus atmosphere over at the National Assembly, yes, Korea's version of the US Congress. This girl went to sell her cookies to bunny uncles. And I think what it also did was give this very glaring example if you knew what you were looking for, but very hidden example if you didn't know what you were looking for, into the sexual politics of Korea. An example of what it really looks like when you're straining in the moment to navigate discrimination about being a woman. What does it look like when the woman is still fighting or juggling in that atmosphere while she's still being attacked? I bring this up because there is a very strong thread line of womanhood here. There's an unspoken female politics going here, not only between male attacking female, female deciding how to best navigate that situation, but even female against female, and also the very clear delineation of, if we just simplified it, good way versus bad way to deal with it. And I bet you know who's who. I'm only going to be the caretaker of this conversation. So women, please take the baton in the comments, but I will speak up and say, ladies, yes, what you see from the men is exactly what it looks like. So if you looked at only the transcript and heard the sound of the testimony of the newly installed CEO, Kim Joo-young, and I'm going to call her CEO K because, okay, Hanni even got her name wrong. Hanni called the CEO Lee Joo-young and had to be corrected by the assembly members. So total disrespect. So I'm going to call her CEO K, okay? So if you had just listened, especially if you listened to her and didn't have a close-up of her face, because her face was reading everybody in the room, but everything else signaled, if you didn't know what you're looking for, you would think that she was, why is she being so weak? Why is she being so passive? Why is she not standing up for herself? And the reason why I wanted to bring this situation of being a woman and how that is so central to this is that it explains how the CEO K's strategy actually in this context was very skillful, very strong, but while acknowledging why she had to choose this route, because a man would never choose this tool. Even if he were more soft-spoken or whatnot, his style would, if let's say his style is more that way, he still wouldn't choose this very complex way of fighting back and holding your position. So that's what I wanted to emphasize, is that there are techniques that it's obvious here that women have to use in this dog-eat-dog world to survive and to win. But from an outsider's perspective, you'd think like, oh, well, she's not doing much. Like, why is she not defending HYBE even? It looks like, I don't know, what the heck is she doing? But thank goodness she don't have a poker face, because her face is saying everything. And you can see even from the men in the audience, they understood what game she was playing. They acknowledged it. And I think a lot of them were thinking like, she's doing this game pretty well. And certainly the lawmakers whom she foiled definitely acknowledged, but were pissed that they were being outmaneuvered. And so from especially an American perspective, it looks like, what the heck was she doing? And, you know, if Hanni wasn't so blatantly just vulgar in her histrionics, then you might think like, okay, well, you know, isn't Hanni doing the strong position? And why is the CEO not doing enough? But it was actually quite the opposite. Before these politicians at the National Assembly, no less, inside the National Assembly, go criticizing what happens in HYBE's hallways, they better check their hallways first. They think that one little off comment that was not audible, no evidence of, totally denied by everybody except Hanni. Hanni's the only person who's saying this happened. They're thinking that off-color comment is worthy of being included in such a grave and serious National Assembly hearing when they can't even check their own hallways.
의원과 진성준 더불어민주당 의원 간의 거친 고성이 오가는 모습이 포착됐습니다.
Look, there's the expression of throwing stones while you live in a glass house, but look at this situation where you're criticizing behavior in somebody else's hallway, but your hallways is jammed up with sledgehammers, axes, Crowbars. Check yourself first. So I want to always remind you guys of the hypocrisy that we're dealing with. This is business as usual, actually, at the National Assembly. They haven't even been able to fix the culture of bullying, even outright hand-to-hand combat at work. And they have the audacity to then excoriate HYBE in a public setting over claims that have no evidence. So the Korean netizens are saying this has devolved into just a taxpayer-funded fan meeting for the uncles. Yes, we're about to take a trip on the road to Cookie County. For New Jeans, we already have the roadmap from their song, Cookie, that we know that their cookies ain't for free, and they not responsible for any cavities if you eat these cookies. Remember they said it was all about listening to CD mixtapes. What about an ear infection? Why are they talking about a cavity? But really what they're talking about, they're not going to be responsible for the fallout. They're not going to be responsible for the consequences. And I think for these bunny uncles, they're going to find out very soon the hard way that they're the ones that are going to be stuck with the cavities of going along with this whole cookie business. I wanted to find a way to exemplify the different paths to Cookie County and what I mean by this without overstepping my boundaries. And I wanted to show you this video that I found while I was doing the whole Gucci research for Jin's Gucci ambassadorship, and also Hanni is a brand ambassador for Gucci, so this sort of is still in the same wheelhouse. But I had no idea that there was a Mugler walk. Mugler is also a high-end fashion designer. And so each fashion house will instruct their models to walk a certain way that exemplifies the brand. And apparently the Mugler brand is exemplified by giving top-class cookie. Take a look.
This is a regular walk. This is a Mugler walk. You gotta serve, top 10, top tier, top level puss.
Now, I am aware that this word is one of the worst words in the English language, and it is extremely loaded. The reason why I also wanted to bring it up is because the Korean equivalent of this word is a word that Jin uses on a very regular basis, a very crass basis. We have evidence of her using it, and even using it against the female employee that brought up the workplace bullying and sexual harassment allegations that she covered up, that she ignored, and that she actively resisted and bullied the accuser with this word. So in Korean, and because I know a lot of you are a non-Korean audience, it won't sound as bad. So like if you said the see you next Tuesday word to Korean people, it wouldn't register the same way because you just didn't grow up with it. You don't have the emotions tied to it. If I said the word that Jin says a lot to a Korean crowd, they would be, whoa, oh, that's pretty crass. That's vulgar. But to you guys, it's probably okay. And that word is 샹 쌍년. So sometimes they say 쌍년, 쌍년, depending on where you're at. And you can kind of see that it has that same feeling of the see you next Tuesday word, and that it is loaded in misogyny and using the power of male against a female in terms of disempowering them. The word itself is relatively innocent. It comes from the word of 상, of just being ordinary. So this is a word that the aristocratic class before democracy would use in that very hierarchical, patriarchal structure to just call like, oh, you're just a common woman. And then it became a lot more derogatory. Oh, you common woman, you know, like whatever kind of connotations that has. And you can definitely feel it in the way that it evolved, where in the dictionary, it's not necessarily sang or shang, but still sang. And so that is a word that Jin used a lot. And that is a word that I would say is the equivalent of see you next Tuesday in English. And I think in a practical sense, we saw the Mugler walk with the CEO walking into the court, and we saw the Mugler walk with Hanni walking into the court. But it's a different way of utilizing, I believe, the cookie, because there is no way to separate how they were treated and how this is being manipulated without the cookie. There is a horrible sense of gender wrapped up into this fight that not HYBE is doing, that Jin is doing. And if you've noticed from a lot of the rabid, toxic fandom of New Jeans, the bunnies, the ones who are actually female seem to have a very conflicted identity with that aspect of how there's a bit of a devaluation of it looks like their cookie. And the men who are in the New Jeans fandom who are toxic seem to be like these creepy men who take advantage of girls who have issues with valuing themselves. And so that, I think, has been the loudest toxic subset of the bunnies, because a lot of the strange hate messages coming my way from the bunnies, 95% of them were sexually charged. It's very odd. So the reason why I say you can't ignore the cookie, whether you are using the cookie properly or abusing the cookie, it's in this situation because the men hold the power and are viewing you through the lens of the cookie and allowing, and that changes how you are allowed to operate. Where's the green light? Where's the red light? And how you swerve around those roadblocks. A lot of it is charged with this discrimination, glass ceiling, even social constraints on behavior that men have placed on Korean women. So it may look like Hanni is much freer and getting the red carpet rolled out, but that is an unfortunate aspect of the people who want the cookies. Whereas now if you look at the CEO, that looks like a woman who has had to fight her way in an environment where men were devaluing her because of the cookie. So when that model was talking about the walk, what I saw there were so many conflicting things, which is how that word is used, so conflicting. The word in Korean, 쌍년, that's usually in a technical sense referring to a woman who is acting out of place, out of line. You're not supposed to be here. You're acting too bold. You're not being like, demure and mindful. And it's a derogatory way to kind of keep women in line. So on the one hand, yes, it could be bold. I'm a rule breaker. But on the other hand, in that walk as well, what I saw is, how do you embody this source of strength and weakness? Because the carrier of the cookie knows that as much of it can be a source of strength and weakness, life and death, use and abuse, treasure and trash. You can't ignore the cookie, but it really does show then on the person when the cookie is always a liability. Will you abuse it for short-term gain, or will you lock it up and be resented for it? But it really does show how you know how to carry it as a burden, or perhaps find a way to use that kind of like weight on your back to your advantage. You don't lead with it, but you hide it so that people can focus on your true talents, ability, work, and just being a person. So I think we did see two very different cookie walks into that courtroom. We saw two very different cookie performances in the hearing room, I should say. And it reflects, I believe, on the character of both of them. Hanni walks in like she invented the Mugler walk, but she's surrounded by these musty bunny uncles who seem like they last dry cleaned their suits in 2023. Why does that matter? Because if it weren't for her cookie, let's be real, would it have happened like this? Even with her abilities as an idol, if it weren't for the cookie aspect of the idol, would it really look like that for her? Why is she using her cookie that way, and why is she allowing her cookie to be used that way? Not very good. Contrast the CEO. She looks like a badass despite all of the attacks she's probably had throughout her life because of her cookie. Not just because of who she is as a person, but simply because of a cookie. And so I think she looks like she's made a month of Sundays out of a see you next Tuesday. So if you want the technical summary of the end and why I think it did not work, these bunny uncles and Auntie in the National Assembly failed in their attempt to smear HYBE, smear the CEO, and try to run a con and build up public opinion. I think they failed. Technically, what was the National Assembly strategy? Because you might not have seen this. What they were trying to do is to get on the books, on the records of workplace conduct violation against HYBE. The reason why they failed is that the laws that the National Assembly members are supposed to fix worked against them in this situation. Hanni is not a HYBE employee, but the National Assembly people were trying to get the CEO to try to say something that would equate Hanni as a HYBE employee. Didn't work. She's not even an employee of ADOR. She's literally just a freelancer. And so the laws really only protect employees in Korea. And so there is a discussion generally still kind of forming to try to increase worker protections against people who are not permanent employees, people who are like freelancers. And that is something the National Assembly has to take care of. That is a failing of the National Assembly and lawmakers when it comes to protecting people like Hanni. They're like, oh, well, HYBE should do a better job protecting. But really, it's the law and the National Assembly members who have failed. Second, they also try to link the death of an employee allegedly from overwork to HYBE. And so like to try to put them in in perception wise, on the same level as the other people who are testifying where their companies actually literally killed people on the job. They were trying to make it look like this employee died from overwork, but didn't happen. The death didn't happen at work. There was a personal illness. There was no autopsy. The parents decided all of that. And the Auntie at the National Assembly had the audacity to say, like, well, yeah, that's how cover-ups happen. Third, then they try to make a passion play, like basically being paid, not being paid for things that you do. In entertainment companies, it happens a lot. Like you're asked to work like, overtime or do things like that, essentially where you have to work more than what your job description was. But it sounded like Auntie just made a little monologue. She gave up that fight. She couldn't. She was just like outplayed by the CEO. Now let's talk about the bunny uncles and how creepy they were, how sad and pathetic it is actually. I've seen this a lot in Korea. And the reason why I think it's not really well parsed out is that not all men are like this. Most men, I believe, are not like this. And so to most people in the general Korean public, it'd be like, well, like those people are just weird, but they're just a lot of the weird people, enough to form a bunny coalition of bunny uncles. And usually it's these men who are manipulated so easily by the Jezebel. And usually it is the promise of a cookie. Let's just be honest. But usually the promises, I believe, are never really fulfilled. Sprinkles at the most. Maybe a chocolate chip or two. But never the full cookie, unless it's for the big dogs who deliver big. And all of these, you can tell, like a lot of these guys, they haven't actually gotten the cookie and they think that they're going to be the one to get the cookie. But usually you never get the cookie. You don't. And so it's really pathetic to see in action. But as we can see from this situation, even all the way up to the National Assembly level, there are guys misusing taxpayer dollars, wasting our time for a cookie coin transaction that's off the books. Could you also call these men kejoshis, the way that Hee-jin loves to complain about kejoshis? I think it's because she surrounds herself with kejoshis. That's why she's so frustrated and acting out against kejoshis. Most people don't have that much of a rage against kejoshis unless you always surrounded yourself with kejoshis. Kejoshis is a word combination between dog and Mr. So it's like some, that dog, kind of, Mr. Dog. So I think some of the other corporate entities were very happy that Hee-jin's Hanni was able to monopolize the headlines to depress some of their stories, because there's a lot of tragedy that happened in a lot of these companies that were being investigated. Yes, that picture of Hanni taking a selfie with the CEO of a subdivision of Hanwha Marine. 5 men died this year from workplace safety violations. And the latest man to die was a week ago. And here he is sitting in the hearing room, smiling and laughing like kids goofing off while the teacher is giving the lesson. And so they had to apologize for that. But in the sense, it kind of decrease the heat on the actual workplace violation or why they were there. Not even in the hearing, though a lot of the Korean public said that like this was a travesty where the ILLIT, a battery manufacturer, should have been also present and grilled in the National Assembly hearing. That was over the summer, maybe a month or 2 months ago. There was a major accident that killed about 23 people at a battery factory, and yes, who is the main customer of that battery supplier? Samsung. So it helped Samsung. So you can kind of tell, like, you know, there's more than one way to make that gravy boat work. And there is a valid argument to say that Hanni had actually no place to be in this hearing, even if her claims were much higher than just a comment. That wouldn't even register at a preschool. But even if her claims were higher, it wouldn't be relevant for her to show up at the National Assembly hearing until the laws were changed to include artists like her. So under the law, she's an artist. So basically, she's essentially like a freelancer. And you might think, oh, well, aren't there protections for freelancers? I know this intimately well. No, there are not. And so all the labor laws that have been, worked for and, people have sacrificed for to create better labor conditions only apply if you are hired as like a permanent employee, which they call regular employee. If not, you're literally like doing the circus trapeze without any safety net. And none of the laws apply to you. That's the problem. So really, this was a place where if the laws were supposed to protect you, you're supposed to give a testimony. She has no reason to be there. If it were really about reforming the freelancer system to have more labor law protection, it would have looked completely different. She would have even have known what that was. She had no idea when one of the lawmakers was trying to steer her in that direction. So under the normal system, she shouldn't have even been there. Nobody would have even taken her seriously. Under the Uncle Bunny system, however, we now get a clearer sense of the real picture, and it looked like it turned into a cookie coin convention. So what was Hanni's testimony? She repeated and didn't offer anything more substantial to what she's already said. She said that she greeted ILLIT in the hallway as ILLIT went into the makeup studio. So they did do a proper greeting. 8 seconds on tape. There's evidence of very politeness. Then Hanni said, 5 to 10 minutes later, as ILLIT left the makeup room, they didn't say goodbye. And not only that, the manager told ILLIT to pretend that they didn't see Hanni and to just ignore her. This is odd. Even if that were the case, how many times you gotta greet each other? Okay, it'd be different, yes, if it was a hello and goodbye of people who are maybe guests to HYBE and you want to make sure, but y'all are sort of working together. But not only that, you're not really working together. You guys are separate teams. If there was a different delegation, are you going to be like always like hello, hello, hello? Like y'all seen each other's faces, you hate each other's faces. Even if you didn't hate each other's faces, are you going to say hello, goodbye to, like, let's say your brother or sister is in the other room? Are you always going to say hello, goodbye, like while you're living in the same house? It's a little odd. But Hanni said that, this is not the only time this kind of thing has happened. We have to suffer from being ostracized. I don't want this to happen to anybody else, so I came out here today. And now we can see this disgusting interaction between the uncles really trying to prop up and show their support for Hanni and really eviscerate the CEO. And It was very odd that they would be so egregious as to not only put a sticker on their laptop saying that they were Team Bunnies, but even in the prologue of them speaking and asking her questions saying that they're on her side. Where is the impartiality? This was a setup. Her uncle said, the CEO said there was no evidence, so just suck it up. Yes, she said that there was no evidence, so there's nothing we can do. Were you satisfied with their response? They said there was CCTV with only the hello greeting, so when I went to go check the CCTV, the exit part was erased. There was no CCTV, and the security team slipped up and said that the footage was deleted. I recorded the conversation because I'm not good at Korean, so I have evidence of them lying. If it were a misunderstanding, I would like to confront them directly. And it wasn't just this incident. We've been mistreated from the debut. I learned from Korean culture that you have to respect your elders, but it doesn't seem people return this respect. So you know what? She didn't really understand Korean culture. She has stuff to learn. What she's talking about, a person in her position, yes, has to show 100% respect. But especially if it's to the elders or other people, they don't have to return the respect that you give them on a 1-to-1 ratio. If you give 100%, they don't have to give 100% back. That's the whole nature of this hierarchical structure. She doesn't understand Korean culture. She just doesn't understand basic culture either. The uncles even allowed crosstalk where there was some evilness going on. There was the smirk shown across the world where Hanni said like, oh, I don't think you did enough. You could have done better. I don't think you did your best. This is when CEO Kim said that we're trying our best. You know, she was being very contrite. She was, being very fawning in the way that she's surviving in this jungle of National Assembly uncles and that one auntie. And it gave the platform for Hanni to be bullying and crying and, pretending she was the victim, but not a lot of people bought it. The only ones buying it, they already sent in their checks, the bunny uncles. And so one of the bunny uncles, who I thought at first was just more neutral, but geez, he was so biased, but he was trying to lead it to a place in the discussion that really focused on the labor abuses. And he asked her like, hey, were you working at HYBE or ADOR thinking that you were under the direction of someone else, like taking orders from someone else? And I've learned from personal experience in terms of the labor law, that is the most critical first hurdle that you have to leap over to be considered an employee. So you can be hired as an employee, and when you're hired as a permanent employee, it's understood that you must take orders. When you're a freelancer, it's much more of a gray zone, and actually by the law, you're not beholden to take orders from anybody. You just fulfill your contract of delivering something on time. Where there is gray zones is people who should be hired as employees and get the benefits, basically extra costs to the company, are a lot of the times hired as freelancers, so the company saves money and accountability, but still orders and gives directions, and you still have a boss as if you were an employee. So the uncle, congressman, assemblyman was trying to get Hanni to say, oh yes, I worked as if I was taking orders from somebody. She didn't understand the question. And then he repeated it and she said, oh, I understand about 60%, but it looked like she understood 20 because she didn't answer the question. And the uncle is pissed that she's not answering the question. It is not going the way that they sort of pre-planned. You can tell that they sort of pre-planned this, not really well though, because they were probably more focused on her cookie instead of their notebook. And so it didn't really go well. Then the uncle says, why do you think the company hates you? She said, oh, I took a different route to becoming an idol than normal. It went well, so I think that's why people wanted to take me down. Do you think the bullying was affected by the fight between Jin and Pang Shi-hyuk and HYBE? So now they're trying to couch it in the sense that there is knock-on effects from a shareholder battle between Jin and HYBE, and it's trickling down to the rest of the people. Hanni says, yes, of course, we can't say there isn't a connection, and I had to speak up. Now we hear from CEO K, who is serving top-level cookie. She starts off by saying, oh, yes, honorable assemblyman or person that I respect. Oh, she's playing.
네, 존경하는 위원님. 최초 6월 13일에 부모님으로부터 제가 어도의 사내 이사 중 일원이었을.
And she's saying that she heard of this situation on June 13th. So she's being very factual and exact, detail-oriented. She said she reviewed the CCTV to take care of the artist, and she repeated that this is a manager, not at ADOR, but from a different company. So she's already putting the lines in the sand, saying like, you can't do anything legally with this situation. Because again, how does somebody over at ADOR have jurisdiction over what happens over at Source Music? So then the CEO was saying, you know, the CCTV had an expiration date, but I tried my best. Unfortunately, there are conflicting accounts internally. Now, this is the move that is chess master, but looks like she's searching for fabrics at Joanne. She said that, I believe everything Hanni is saying, and I'm trying to find evidence to support her position, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to find anything yet. And she even did it with some sort of breathy, remorse. Uncle is shuffling papers like crazy because she changed the game board and he has to like try to adjust and try to find something else. And then he's like, well, if the manager wasn't from ADOR, which label are they from? And then the CEO said they are from a different label with a different CEO. And then the uncle said, you'd agree that employees shouldn't be subject to workplace harassment and should be targets of protection. CEO said, yes. Aren't artists in the same category? This is a trap. He knows that the artists are not in the same category as employees under the law. And so he's trying to trap the CEO. And the CEO said, I understand that there are discussions underway in the National Assembly to include artists in the employee category, but legally artists aren't included in the employee category. This is the part that was manipulated by the bunnies. They took it out, the soundbite out of context, and then said that, oh, the CEO doesn't consider artists as human. But really it means like legally, I understand that because of you, lawmakers have not protected artists yet, so they're not given the employee protections. Now, this is where she showed and flexed her skill. She said, however, whether they're employees or not in our company, according to like our family rules, the rules in this house, is that no matter whether you're an employee or an artist, we have a code of conduct, we have guidelines, and we have regular trainings, and we have a lot of efforts made to institutionalize this as part of our culture to have good workplace relations. Uncle said, ADOR can be seen as a subsidiary of HYBE. Yes. Uncle says, ADOR employees can also be seen as HYBE employees. The CEO senses the trap yet again, said legally the employees are members of separate corporations, but yes, they belong to the HYBE label. Uncle lost that point. Uncle's on a rant now, said, is this shareholder dispute affecting the atmosphere in the company? CEO, whether this is real or strategic, the pause. It deflates the other side. She knows what she's doing. She said, I asked the assembly to respect the separate ongoing legal cases that are going on in court. We have to be careful with what we say. And the uncle says, well, we think now they're going to give MBA advice to HYBE. So we think there needs to be efforts made in this particular situation of the shareholder conflicts trickling down to the conflicts among the entities in HYBE. No, it's not a shareholder dispute thing going on. It's just a bully situation going on. He went on, when asked about your efforts to prevent bullying, you only gave a very general and vague answer. But now he goes into the very specific plan that she outlined. He said, you said there was a reporting center, and then what happens when a case gets reported? But that's a program that was probably set up because of the current problem. This type of bullying questioning that puts words and policies, that's painting their own version of reality that does not exist and trying to get it onto the assembly record is egregious. I think the equivalent of this would basically be like a truck driver driving drunk. They should be taken off the road. Then he said, I think you need to make efforts to create an atmosphere that protects the artists. And her face card gave Chewy cookie that just turned crunchy. And he said, have you ever made the effort? So the CEO's responses, as you can tell, has been very careful and very guarded. To the untrained eye, it could look like guilt or she's weak or she's accepting, but really what she's doing is the long-term strategy. The politicians need the fast, aggressive sound bites, and they would appreciate a flippant response because that would make themselves look better. Whereas sometimes I think like, wow, the CEO was being a little bit too contrite but she is doing the long-term strategy. Like she's coming off of like a whole, decades long career in just sitting in meeting rooms and, needing to see these people day in and day out. So she's more of a person that was trying to calm them down. I understand your worries. There are deep concerns. She wanted to talk more, got cut off by the uncle. And he did it in a way, again, where it was more of like a man shutting up a woman that he didn't want to hear speak because she wasn't giving in and giving him the affirmation that he wanted. And he says, well, if this ignore gate is true, the manager can also be a victim because in this fight with the shareholders, they would be taking sides to save their own butts. They could be caught up in the middle of a fight. Hanni and the other artists and our trainees. You should see the face card on the CEO. She's like, the heck? What? Why are you saying our trainees as if like you've been meeting up with my trainees? It's sort of like looking at a guy and be like, you've been seeing my daughter? He's like, they need to be protected. Can't you do that? And then she responded, yes, I will take your accounts into consideration and work on them diligently. She understands that the show today is about the uncles. So she's not going to give them more spotlight by being an active scene partner. She's letting them dig their own graves. And I thought that was a very shady thing to say, like our trainees. And he continued on. He said, Hanni, I thank you so much for coming out today. Your bravery will help all the artists in your companies, not just the juniors, but our juniors. Again, this our thing. Now, Korean people in general might think like, okay, that's a little bit odd, but they would wholeheartedly just accept the gaslighting response if he was ever even called out on it, where he's saying like, oh, I kind of consider them like like in a very loving kind of protecting tone as if they were my children. But anybody who really knows what's going on with the cookie song knows that this is a very highly suspect box of cookies. So now we have the uncle with the laptop. He said like, oh, Bang Si-hyuk is not here. This is not the time to be frolicking in America. He's the culprit behind this latest social unrest. Another way that Korean people try to attack, especially in the National Assembly level, where it somewhat has like this legal grip, is like if you do something that really causes widespread social unrest, the government can take action against you. And so he's trying to link it to that, saying like, oh, we've heard how Hanni says that they feel ostracized and were told to be ignored. It's shocking that this would come from a major entertainment company betraying the public like this. All of this seems like a cheap soap opera. Okay, this coming from the National Assembly that on a regular basis gives us soap operas complete with sledgehammers and crowbars and physical fights and blocking of hallways so that nobody can go past laws. That should be illegal. And they're going and commenting about how this looks like a bad soap opera with them looking like the fools. And he says, oh, you still the chief of HR at HYBE? CEO says yes. So as the top HR person at HYBE, you're saying that since the two labels are separate, there was no reply. Does this make sense? She said, mediation efforts are underway. There are internal issues, conflicting accounts. And then before she was able to go on about like how, these accounts are conflicting, that kind of cast down on Hanni. Uncle interrupted. And he did it in a way where the subtext was like, you rambling women don't want to hear you because you won't agree with me. So then he said, you talked about the code of respect earlier. Does it apply to the employees? Aren't artists also employees? Again, miscalculated trap. She's not that dumb. You can't throw anything over this CEO. She said that this code of conduct applies to everybody. And the reason why the uncle messed up is that he was thinking from the law's perspective, it doesn't cover the law doesn't cover everybody. He wanted her to say it doesn't cover them because it's not covered by the law. But remember, this is more of a gentleman's agreement. This code of conduct is not tied to the law. It's more of like, if you want to work in this building at HYBE, you're going to have to abide by this code of conduct. And so that can apply to everybody, including the artists who are not legally protected, but they are protected by HYBE doing a solid for everybody to protect them under a code of conduct. And so that just destroyed Uncle's arguments and plan. And he was shucking and jiving, struggling, because she just shot down his whole performance. Because he said, I have the code of conduct here. And you could totally tell he was about to go on this like Bible thumping type of rant, being like, shouldn't this code of conduct also be applied to the employees as well as the artists? And then she's basically preempted that whole thing by saying our code of conduct applies to everybody. Now he's just trying to make up for lost time and say like, well, if this were true, what happened to Hanni, that would be a code of conduct violation, right? And she said, yes, if it were true. Well, that just opens up the door now for we know that there are many true code of conduct violations that Hee-jin has done. And we have the evidence for. So where is Hee-jin at this National Assembly hearing? Where's the code of conduct for the National Assembly? Does it have clauses for sledgehammers and crowbars and fistfights? Where is the code of conduct that we can refer to for the National Assembly? All right, Auntie tries to flex. Auntie tries to flex, but she fails miserably. She tries to lob this accusation that HYBE was responsible for the death of a worker. That's what she's trying to equate, because all the other CEOs showing up were responsible for deaths of workers. And so she's saying like, well, there was this incident in February 2022, an employee at HYBE collapsed from work and then died at the hospital. We received a tip off of this because there's a lot of long working hours, including nighttime shifts at entertainment companies. Imagine how many people at the National Assembly are burning the midnight oil. But anyway, then the CEO, she was trying to correct the assemblywoman in a very demure way. She's like, well, as far as I know, and then she brings out the receipts. As far as I know, happened September 2022, not February. So already Auntie is sweating because she can't even get her facts right. Then she said this person went into the nap room at 5 p.m. More receipts. Unfortunately, he was found collapsed and then transferred to the hospital. And then a few days later, he died. This was very sad. CEO was trying to express remorse, interrupted by Auntie, who doesn't want to share the spotlight with CEO K. Auntie said, you said it was a personal illness, but to us on the committee, it's a workplace illness. Like, they have a serious problem with if I say so mouth. And there's no evidence of this. And the auntie said, like, well, you're taking care of multiple idol groups at the same time. There were many instances of this person working day and night. We checked. There was no industrial accident claim. So she even said it herself, the evidence showed there's no industrial accident. This was not an industrial accident. But then she said, well, since there's no evidence of an industrial accident claim, we think it was a cover-up, and there should have been an industrial accident claim. The CEO did another cookie slap and said, ooh, respectful, honorable assemblywoman, there absolutely was no cover-up. Assemblywoman Auntie said, there's no autopsy, right? CEO says, yes, that was a decision made by the parents. The auntie said, oh yeah, well, usually cover-ups work that way. Agreements with the family to cover it up. Now that is true. However, what evidence does she have that it was true in this situation? She is literally just going hog wild with all these accusations against HYBE. Then she didn't even try the passion play thing because she knew that she was outgunned, outmatched. So that's the thing. With this CEO, when you just kind of look at her from a very Western perspective and then also just at a glance, even in Korea, it looks like what does she do? Like, does she know what she's doing? Oh, she knew exactly what she was doing, and she shut down even these National Assembly bullies. Let's be clear, this was a bully setup of humiliation that they were trying to play on the CEO and HYBE. And it didn't work. Even Hanni's ending performance with her fake tears. You can tell the young guys in the background, they were not buying it. And of course there were manner eyes of not trying to stare at her, but also the vibe that I got was that, and I've seen this a lot, I want to bring this up, is that these younger guys were kind of feeling like, okay, this cookie is not for us because she's been already claimed by all the older uncles in this room. And I found that this dynamic was very disgusting. Not that they have claims over Hanni either, but just in general, there should be a dynamic, because you could see this in society, that young men should be flirting with the young women, you know, if they go that way. And that's the crew, that's the community or pool that seems age appropriate to me. However, I think part of the big frustration with a lot of these younger guys is that they are seeing the dating pool of women that's supposed to be their age being like snapped up or adulterated by men of their father's generation. And it's just a very odd feeling that there's nothing that they can do if like their dad's friends or their, you know, people of their dad's and dad's friends' age are essentially banging their girlfriends, or the women who should be in their pool of trying to be their girlfriends. It's kind of gross. And I think that creates a lot of resentment in the younger men's group. And instead of targeting their older generation of men as being the source of the problem, in some weird twisted way, a lot of these men will then blame the women. And so that's why I bring it up, because like, I think that there is a culprit here who is hiding behind the sofa cushions at the room salon that needs to be brought out. And that effect and that dynamic leading to contributing to some of the misogyny again against women. The CEO's closing remarks is more like a politician. Oh, she was politicianing better than the people who failed at questioning her. And she said, we will take your opinions into account, work diligently at them. We will listen to Hanni and elevate the voices of our artists to carefully protect human rights so that they can fulfill their hopes and dreams. She said again, I've only been CEO for a month and a half, but if you give me the chance and trust me, I will make a better company, pay back society, and give back to those who love K-pop and have a much better company, and do it with responsibility, sense of care to make things better. So she outplayed them all. she really outplayed them all without looking like she was playing. That is the master chess player in this situation in Korea, where you have to look like truly you didn't force anything upon anybody else, but you were able to slide the bullets out of the chamber of anybody holding a weapon at you, and then stand your ground, not overreact, and then know that you already came prepared with all the lines drawn in the sand, and you're not going to fall into any of the traps laid out for you. So she did an excellent job, definitely. I don't know if I would want to have coffee and, crumpets with her, because she kind of scares me. But I think that's a good thing, because I think Chairman Peng did a very good thing where he put the right person in the role, absolute right person in the role, to go head to head with Minnie Jin. So Minnie Jin can be counting her cookies. We have an update that Minnie Jin was renewed for 3 more years to be an inside director, and she did come crawling back to accept the creative director or producer job of New Jeans that she had rejected before all this mess. So it only goes to show that her play with the press conference that the New Jeans girls did live on YouTube, and then her Hyundai card thing, and that Hanni's testimony thing, all of these recent histrionics did not work, and she had to crawl back to get what she could until she could probably launch her next attack. All right, guys, what do you think of Hanni's hearing with her bunny uncles at the National Assembly? And were you as weirded out by it as I was? Put your comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.